Good day, everyone. Happy Monday, and welcome to the webinar on scaling your practice with Aero Workflow and Practice Ignition. Today, our two presenters are going to be Max Walsh from Practice Ignition. He's the U.S. Territory Manager, and he does all of the operations in the United States for Practice Ignition. And also Laura Redmond, who is the founder of Redmond Accounting, which is a completely cloud accounting firm, and the co-founder of Cloud Consultancy, the company that offers Aero Workflow. And I think Max is going to start off today, and he's going to talk about the first part of scaling your practice. And take it away, Max.
Great, thank you for the introduction, Sarah. I just want to make sure everyone can see my screen clearly before we start going through it. Can you see that okay?
Yes, your screen is coming through very clearly.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for having me today. My part of the webinar on scaling your practice is going to focus on building a sales process for your accounting firm so you can go out there and win all that work that Laura is going to tell you how to do efficiently. Now, before we get into actually building that process, I feel like there's a little bit of a misunderstanding about the word sales in the accounting industry. A lot of accountants, bookkeepers, people all around the industry see sales as a bad word. Now, I think this is because when people think of sales, they might think of this guy, Alec Baldwin and Glenn Ross, or Leonardo DiCaprio in The Wolf of Wall Street. They think about this boiler room mentality of, we're going to push our client around, we're going to get what we want from them, it's going to be a really hard sell. Now, I don't think that's the case. In accounting, just like actually in the software industry, it's all about relationship selling. So you want to build trust with your client, you want to provide value for them. If your client signs up for your services and then a month later realizes that everything you told them in that meeting isn't actually true, that you're not providing a lot of benefit for them, they're going to leave, they're going to go find a new accountant, you're not going to make a lot of money, you're not going to get any referrals, and it's not going to be a great relationship for either of you. So really what sales are about in the accounting industry is building a rapport with your client, making sure that you can deliver services well that are really going to benefit their business so that you can build that relationship as a trusted advisor. Now, with that bit on sales out of the way, removing sales is a bad word, here's today's agenda. We're going to talk about documenting your sales process. We're going to talk about building a unique selling proposition for your firm, how to prospect, and then the last two kind of run together, but it's how to ask for a sale and then having the means to close that sale once you do ask for it. So the first thing we're going to talk about today is documenting. Now you're going to hear a lot of this today. I know it's a section in Laura's presentation as well. And the key thing about documenting is when you write something down, when you put it on paper, it allows other people to share that knowledge. It allows you to make that knowledge scalable. It allows other people in your firm to take advantage of your experiences. And then the second thing it's going to do is allow you to improve on your process. So part of the exercise today that we'll get to in a minute is starting to document your sales process. Write down some steps that you might want to take. Now, the only way to improve on those steps, to see if some of them are working, to test them, to make sure that you're improving every time you meet with a new client, is to have them documented. So you can go back and see, okay, this particular thing worked, whereas something else might not have. So here's an example sales process. Now this is a simple one. It doesn't have all the steps off it. If someone says no to a certain step, it would take them to a different list. But this would be an example of what we might want to build out today. So here's the 8 steps that you might take with a client if they say yes all the way, everything along the way. Now I'm going to jump in a little bit deeper on one of these. So in that full meeting, you might have a few more steps in there. You're going to ask them key questions. You're going to identify their pain points. You're going to apply your unique selling proposition to those pain points, identify a suite of apps and solutions for them, articulate how you might deliver value, and then price them. So ideally, when you go to document out your sales process, each one of those 8 steps that we showed in that last slide are going to have sub-steps inside of them. You're going to have alternates. So if someone says no to a certain step, they might get an email 5 weeks later. Now that's a little too complex for today. But what we want to start doing today is build towards that list. Now, let's get started on documenting. So if you're like me and you like to write everything down with a pen and paper, pull out a pen and paper. If you've got 2 monitors, pull up a Word document on the open monitor And what I want everyone to do so that they walk away from today's webinar with something actionable and with something documented is, as I'm talking and as Laura's talking, write down 5 things that you want to try implementing in your practice. Now, that could be starting to build that list of documentary steps to your sales process. That could be something that Laura speaks about later. But let's get in the habit of starting to do that. So pull up that pen and paper, pull up that Word document, put 5 numbered slots on it, and over the course of the webinar, write down 5 things that you want to start trying in your practice. So that's all for documenting. Next, we're going to talk about the unique selling proposition, or USP. Now, your USP is what makes your firm stand out from other firms like yours. That's what makes you the Technicolor zebra instead of just the black and white zebra. Now, USPs could be based on a variety of different things. It could be a specific vertical. We are the best accountants for dentists. It could be based on specialized knowledge. You are an absolute tax expert. It could be based on service level. So, no matter what, we're going to take the best care of you. We're going to answer the phone at 2 o'clock in the morning when you call us with a question. Or it could be based on the area you're in. So for everyone in the audience, start to have a think about that. What are those things that differentiate you? What makes your firm unique? What can you say your firm does better than anyone else? Now, as you're thinking about that, you're going to want to create your USP in several different versions. You're going to want that 1-sentence version. That might be, your elevator pitch. When you first meet a client, first meet a prospect, you can spit that out with no problem. You know it backwards and forwards, and that's very quickly, maybe we are cloud-based accountants that focus on the dental industry and serve clients in northern Florida. That's your 1-sentence version. Now, you're also going to need a 1-paragraph version. And this 1-paragraph version might go on your website. It could be the About Us section, or the core values, or the mission, or something like that. And that's a little more detailed, really fleshing out, all those main ideas. So maybe a full sentence on each component of that 1-sentence version of your USP. Now, the third version you should know of your USP is a 1-minute version. This is what you're going to use when you sit down with a client in a formal meeting and you're pitching them on your firm. Now, this is how you can articulate, all right, these are the things that we do well, this is how we're going to help your business, and this is why you, if you fit what we deliver in our USP, should choose us over any other accounting firm. So these 3 different versions, 1 sentence, 1 minute, and 1 paragraph, allow you to really articulate why your firm should be chosen over another. Now, the 4th one's pretty important here. It's don't be modest. That's one that I sometimes struggle with. When I'm talking about Practice Ignition, I'm hesitant to say that we do something the best or better than anything else out there. But if that's true, you shouldn't be afraid to hammer that home. If you really are the best tax preparer in your area, and that is something that's going to appeal to your client, you should be telling them that. Now, I like memes, so I worked the Dos Equis meme guy in here, and he's saying, I don't always take on new clients, but when I do, they need to be on QBO and willing to meet remotely. Now, this is kind of a silly example, but I think it's a really important way to lead into prospecting. So there's a lot of benefits of prospecting with your client. Now, prospecting, let me take it a step back here. Prospecting is the questions you're asking a lead as you move them towards becoming a client. So there's different kinds of prospecting that you might be doing. It could be prospecting on a short 5-minute phone call after you get the lead. It could be more in-depth questions that you're taking on in that first sales meeting, but there are a lot of really big benefits of prospecting. Now, the first one, and I think the most important, is information to win that client. So you need to know what that client's needs are. You need to know why they're looking for an accountant or bookkeeper. You need to know what type of accountant and bookkeeper they're looking for if you're going to articulate your USP well to them, and you're going to articulate the important pieces of it. So that's step 1, getting that information to win the client. Now, step 2 is ensuring a long-term relationship. So that kind of comes back to that relationship selling point that I talked about in the very beginning. So, great, we know the information we need to win them, we know what we need to say to get them to sign up, but we also want to ensure that this is a long-term relationship where they're going to be able to pay us money for a long period of time and where they're going to come out satisfied. So we need to know, let's say the USP is great, you're great on the tax side of things, that's what the client's looking for, but you really only like working with cloud-based ledgers, and they hate it. They only want to work with a desktop-based ledger. If there's that point of friction, you might not be able to have a long-term relationship, and that's an important thing to learn in your prospecting. And now the third one is it cuts time wasters, and I see this issue crop up for a lot of accounting and bookkeeping firms. where they will meet with somebody 4 times, and they'll spend 6 hours talking to this client, and the client, all they really want to do is run them around, maybe get the pricing out of it in the end. It's not a great fit. So prospecting can do a really good job of cutting out those time wasters where you sink hours into someone that's never going to become a client. And that's really developed by thinking about, all right, what are my key questions? We got to develop a list of prospecting questions, and there are different levels of them. So there's maybe 5 that you would have in that first phone call, and those are the ones that are going to tell you very, very quickly at a high level, all right, is this person going to be a good client? Those could be based on ways that you work. Those could be based on the industry or vertical that you're in. If you choose a vertical, that's a really good way to eliminate time wasters and to prospect quickly. And then you're going to have a list of further prospecting questions that you might ask in your first more formal meeting, where you're really getting into what benefits can you provide them. So figuring out what their needs are, figuring out what their pain points are. And then a third thing on developing these prospecting questions, not only are they going to be a good client, not only how much benefit can you provide them, but what do you care about when it comes to your clients? Is profitability the only thing that you care about? Are you only worried about making as much money as possible with those clients? Is it the work itself? Do you want to focus on the work that you enjoy doing, the work that you find fulfilling? Is it interpersonal? Do you want to work with nice people that you have a good relationship with? I mean, there are clients out there that are going to fulfill all 3, being profitable, interesting work, and providing good interpersonal relationships. But it's really important in these prospecting questions to prioritize them. Are you willing to take someone who's going to be profitable, who's going to let you do enjoyable work, but who's going to be a pain to deal with? And there's no right or wrong answer to these questions. That's very firm specific and something that each firm needs to decide for themselves around how they're going to prospect. So the next one is asking for the sale. This is something that when I first started working in sales that I really, really struggled with, and it took me a long time to build good habits on. But I can honestly say it's been the most beneficial thing. If there's one tip or trick to take away from this presentation on sales, building a sales process, it's asking for the sale. Asking for the sale is really, really powerful. Now, it's very rare that you're going to find a client who you're going to explain what you're going to do, you're going to talk about your services, and they're going to say, yes, pay me, I want to pay you the money, here's a check, let's go. A lot of the time you need to ask for that sale. And usually in a meeting, in an accounting or bookkeeping sales process, it can be done passively. You give your demo, that's what I would do. You explain your services, you talk them through how it's going to benefit them, and you'll say, oh, I'll send you a proposal and an engagement letter after the meeting. That's not what we want to do. What we want to do at the end of that meeting is ask for the sale. Say, do you want to work with us? Here, let's have you sign up. This is what the price is going to be. Let's do it. Now, there's a lot of benefits of asking for that sale. One, it gives your client the opportunity to actually say yes to you. And the second one is it's actually the easiest time to address questions. So let's take 2 scenarios, for example. In scenario 1, I'm meeting with my client. I ask for the sale. I give them a proposal. We talk through everything in the proposal, and they think it's too expensive. They don't really understand the value of those monthly management meetings that we're going to do. Now, if I'm there in the meeting, I can immediately say, oh, this is the value that it's going to provide for your business. This is why it's worth it. Maybe I'll come down on my price a little bit, but I can make that work. Now, if I send them a proposal a day later, a week later, they open it up on their email, they see that price, you're not there to address it, they might just check out. They might, look at another proposal they've gotten from another account and decide to go with that one. It doesn't give you that immediate opportunity to address their questions and really get down to what they want. Now, kind of hand in hand with asking for the sale is having a means to close it. So these 2 sentences are 2 of my favorite things in sales. They're not a client until they sign, and they're not a good client until they pay. So, it's great we can ask for the sale. We've started getting in the habit of doing that in our meetings, but you also need a means to actually close it when they do say yes, and you also need a means to get payment. It's great that they're signed up, but if it turns out they're not willing to pay, then that undoes all the work that you've done in closing that sale and getting them to sign. So there are a couple ways that you can have a means to close the sale in the meeting. One is preparing an engagement letter and a proposal actually on site in the meeting. And that kind of segues into a few slides that I brought for you guys about Practice Ignition, which is the company that I work for and the solution that we provide. So the core of our product is engagement letter and proposal system. Now, it does a lot of things for you, but one of the really exciting ones and one of my favorite features of it is it lets you put together an engagement letter and a proposal in about 2 minutes. So rather than mucking around with a Word document for half an hour, if you're in that meeting with a client and you can have your laptop open, you can create that engagement letter and that proposal as you're going along, send it to your client. They can actually read it and accept it on their phone and sign from their phone. So they can enter payment details, they can give a digital signature, they can do all those things. You can close that sale immediately and ensure that you're going to get paid and have the work signed off on. Now it's going to do a whole bunch of other things for you, like tracking the whole process, giving you a revenue pipeline. That's not really the focus of today's webinar. We're focused more on, actually giving the content. If you guys do want to learn more about Practice Ignition, we're going to have a poll question at the end. And you can sign up to receive some information in the demo. Also, there are a couple of next steps here. If you do want to check out PI and learn a little bit more about what we do, you can sign up for a trial with this link. You can book a demo with me or attend a webinar to learn more about the product. And we're doing a discount code for everyone that came today, Scaling Your Practice 15, and that'll give you 10% off for the first 12 months. Now, all these slides are going to get posted along with the recording, but if you want to take a second to write any of these links down, please do so. And I'm going to pass it over to Laura for the next section of the webinar.
Thank you, Max. Hello, everyone. Give us a second to switch the screen. I'm going to show my screen. Okay, hopefully everyone can see that. So thank you, Max, for walking us through the steps of the sales process. You are right, that is, I'll speak personally, a little bit scary for accounting professionals sometimes who are not as practiced at the sales steps. So that was very helpful for me to review. So let's say we did a stellar job communicating our value and we now have a new client. Hooray, but party's over. We have to deliver now. This next part, the service delivery, is critical. Not only do we want to deliver the superior services that we promised, but we want to make a profit on them. So whether you're performing the work yourself or delegating the work to staff, you have to manage the workflow in your accounting practice. When I say workflow, I'm talking about all of the individual steps on all of the apps you use to perform all of the services you provide. It helps to have a system to manage all of this work. And if you're thinking about value pricing, you must have workflow management systems. If you fix the price, then you must control your cost and your service delivery. Creating a firm that is scalable and ready for growth is not an easy task. However, doing so is a proactive approach to success now and in the future. So we're going to walk through about 3 general steps here today. The first step in making sure that your practice is ready for growth is to define what you do. Defining your services is essential for scalability. So define the services you provide. Define your menu. For example, do you provide payroll service? Do you pay bills? Do you create tax returns? Define what services you provide and, at least internally, define what apps or other tools you're going to use to provide them. Are you using a particular desktop product, or do you provide bookkeeping for whatever clients using whatever accounting software they have? Once you define what services you offer and what apps or tools you're going to use to provide them, you also want to define, as Max told us more about, what sort of clients you provide these services for. Perhaps you have a particular industry. Perhaps you work with businesses at a particular revenue level. This helps you determine whether your service menu that you just defined fits your clientele. So you want to get these two working together. Now you know what you're doing and who you're doing it for. So the next thing you want to define is how you're going to perform your services. Every firm should document procedures. As Max was talking about in the sales process, you also need to document procedures in the service delivery area to detail the best practices that you have developed over the countless hours of experience you have gained serving your clients. So this is you, the owner of the firm or the manager of the firm, saying, these are the services we provide and this is how we're going to do it. There are a million other ways to do it, but this is how our firm is going to do it. Each service you provide should have detailed procedures documented that outline exactly what apps you're going to use. And if you are going to provide, say, payroll, and maybe you use 2 different apps depending on the client, then detail a procedure for each app. You want to have complete instructions for how to perform the work. You want to have print screens that clarify for your staff exactly how to do the work. Make sure that you include all the tricks and techniques you've developed over the years beyond the original training that your team got when they got certified on the app. When you're using more than one app, define how multiple apps will be used together. So if you're defining how you pay bills, you might have to jump into the ledger and see if there are funds available. So show all of how you interact with multiple apps if you do that. Picture a new hire in your firm who may be certified on the apps you use when you hired that person, but they need to reference how your firm is going to use them. You may have several procedures related to a particular service. For example, payroll may have different procedures that you've documented. One procedure for paying employees, another procedure for remitting payroll tax, and another one for filing payroll forms. So you want to update your procedures as you continuously hone your technique and improve your service delivery and your profitability. And when they're documented, it's easier because you have a place to go to update that when you learn a new tip. So, and the next step, also related to defining, is to create step-by-step checklists. You see the pilot here? He's going through his checklist. You know he knows how to do all of these steps. He had to memorize this to get his license, but he is not going to just go off rogue. He's going to follow his checklist. So create step-by-step checklists. This is what your staff will use as they perform the work every time. You want to add every action that you want them to take, and you want to put it in order that you want them to do the work. It's a quick reference so that nothing is missed, and it helps them keep on track with their work. It's helpful if you can have check boxes, because then your staff can check off each one as they go. And if they have to stop in the middle of a task, maybe it's time for lunch, or maybe the day ends and they have to start up on this tomorrow, they can come back and work on it later, and they know which ones they've already checked off. If they have any question about how to perform a particular step, then you know that those documented procedures we just talked about will be their reference. So this step-by-step checklist is a shorter version, and then if they don't understand something, they just can go look at the procedure that explains it with the print screens if they need some more help there. These steps are not, I'm not referring to the step-by-step how to use an app. For example, say a bill pay app. The bill pay app will tell you the workflow steps for using their app is to enter a bill, approve a bill, and pay a bill. These are not the steps I'm talking about. I'm talking about the step-by-step instructions for one specific task that will be performed by a particular staff in your firm. So what are all the things you want the AP clerk to do when they enter bills? If they have to add a new vendor while they're entering bills, do you want them to send a W-9 request to the vendor? All of the things that the AP clerk needs to do. That's the step-by-step checklist. That's an example of what I'm talking about in the step-by-step checklist. The step-by-step checklist could be a standalone service that you perform every time a client orders something, or this could be one piece of a larger task that you've divided between several staff as a best practice for separation of duties. So the example I just gave there about the AP clerk entering a bill, there's also going to be another step-by-step checklist for the person who pays the bills. So this step-by-step checklist, the task may involve jumping in and out of multiple apps. It may involve logging into a client's bank or accessing a shared spreadsheet with the client or with the firm. You may have a payroll checklist that says to go look at the online Google holiday calendar to see if there were any holidays during the period you're about to pay for that client. So all of these resources, which may be links to websites or documents, are part of that step-by-step checklist. If you want them to go check that holiday calendar, put that as a step on the checklist. So when your services are clearly defined, then your staff can perform the work consistently, efficiently, and effectively. Having these procedures in place when you need to add new staff or onboard new clients ensures that the process will go as smoothly as possible. So defining what you do and how you do it is core to running a business. And like I said earlier, it's not that easy to start up and run an accounting firm, but it is critical to define this because you can just imagine the chaos that will ensue if you don't define any of this. So all of this that I'm talking about, this defining what you do and how you do it, this is your firm's knowledge capital. Your knowledge capital is your secret sauce. Your firm will use this knowledge capital to create revenue. So, once you've defined what you do, you need to organize when you do it. You want to set up a system that clearly informs everybody in the firm exactly what they need to do, which you've already defined, and when they need to do it. So whether you're using paper checklists, Excel spreadsheet, or a workflow app, you want to have a system for organizing both one-time services and recurring services. Remember those resources I was talking about a moment ago, the Google holiday calendar or a link to your client's bank, online banking, all of those resources. When you're organizing your workflow, make sure that you can include these resources so that when your staff are working on their checklist, that they can get to these resources quickly. This could be clients' documents. These could be their passwords. Contact information. Sometimes your staff are working and they have to contact the legal team or the insurance agent. You know, as trusted advisors for our clients, we often work closely with the other team of trusted advisors related to our clients. So links to website, whatever the resources are, you know what they are, what your staff need to get the work done. If your staff needs a resource in order to perform their work, you want to make sure that you've made it available to them right there when they need it. Otherwise, you've got a bottleneck and the work will stop. So in addition to setting up a schedule, your system should also give visibility to everything that has been done and that has not been done yet, and how long it took. These are helpful KPIs for an accounting firm. Whether you are billing hourly, I am not talking about hourly billing or not, whether you are billing hourly or not, I'm talking about knowing how much time something takes so that you know how to schedule it for other staff in the future. So once you set up a master schedule, then little assistance should be needed from you on a day-to-day basis to keep it running. This starts to free some of your time as the principal or manager of the firm. Setting up a system where all the firm's work is scheduled ensures that your firm will deliver your services that you promised in a timely manner, and it provides that framework for easily or more easily integrating new clients in the future, because you know your staff's calendar. You know where they have time available or not. Now, we talked about defining and organizing. Once you've defined your services and organized your practice, the delegating part comes next. And this should be a little bit easier than if you had not defined your services or organized your practice with the schedule. So let's talk about staff. Your staff is one of your greatest assets. A firm needs to manage staff availability and labor costs. Your staff are trained. They're intelligent people. They want to do great work. You've probably made sure that they're certified in all sorts of apps before hiring them or after hiring them. They probably keep up to date with our industry things. They probably watch the QB show or attend QBO chat regularly. They know what's up. They're experts, and they don't want to be micromanaged. Clearly defined procedures and scheduled tasks empower your staff to do their work without constant supervision, aka nagging. When working remotely, you can't really look over at their desk anyway and see them. So you don't want to interrupt their day anyway. But due to all these factors with our now more and more cloud-based and distributed workforce, you want to have a system to help manage that labor, and you want to give them all the information they need to do their work autonomously. Your staff are intelligent people that want to do great work, so let them. We just have to get out of the way sometimes and not create a bottleneck. Making use of your documented procedures that you defined allows you to then delegate that work to your staff. And this optimizes your workflow in all sorts of situations that are very normal for accounting firms, such as when you're performing work that is not performed very frequently. We have work that we do quarterly or annually, and sometimes you just can't remember every tiny little detail the next time you perform it. I'll give you an example. My firm, I'm based in California. Every so often we may have to do a payroll tax in another state, and we may not have to remit payroll tax in that state very frequently. So if I have all the steps defined for me, I'm going to be much more efficient about getting that done and doing it accurately. So another normal situation we all come across is when you lose an employee. They leave. Your other staff have to take over this work, and they may know how to do all these services, but they may not be that familiar with this client. Or you just may have an employee go on vacation and someone has to cover them for a week. You may have a new hire and you need to train them and get them up to speed. You also may have a set of standard services that you offer, and then you take on that client that has a very particular way of doing things that's a little bit different than the norm. So all of these situations you probably can relate to, and you can imagine that having a step-by-step checklist for that particular client, for that service, will help new hires and help the rest of your staff cover others who are not in the office. This optimized workflow equals increased profitability for your firm. So in addition, having a clearly visible system gives staff a framework to then add their knowledge and experience to the firm's reservoir of knowledge capital. As your staff are doing their work and they're developing new and improved best practices and tips and tricks, and as you know, if you're working with SaaS software, it changes. A new release comes out on a Friday afternoon, and things are going to have to be done a little different. So once you've defined your procedures and your step-by-step checklist, because you have that documented and because you've delegated to staff, you can have staff be able to update that information as it changes. This also is another chance to remove you as the bottleneck in the firm. So freeing your staff to do their work without interference allows you to focus on the big picture and position your firm as a firm of the future. So here I'll show on screen a couple of screenshots of Aero Workflow. And we certainly can talk about any questions you have. I'll just go through a few of these now. As I was just saying about knowledge capital, when your firm has clearly defined your knowledge capital, your documented procedures and processes, and it's systemized, and the system is in place, then your firm is poised and ready for growth. Defining this work and scheduling it at the proper recurrence interval is this workflow management system, and that can be a paper checklist, as I was saying, or an Excel spreadsheet, or a workflow app like Aero. So here I'm showing Aero on screen, but if you're just starting out, you certainly can use, we used a spreadsheet for years before we developed Aero. So whatever system you can picture you have, everything I'm talking about here is related to that. Aero was built to help firms not just manage, but scale their practices. So it is a cloud-based workflow management app. It is built for accounting firms, by accounting firms. It's a work assignment tool, and it does provide the procedures area for managing your knowledge capital, your procedures and your checklists, and the checklists have links to all of the resources I was talking about that you want to give to your staff, links to online banking, passwords for your clients, all that sort of thing. So Aero also has a management area that gives the firm a bird's eye view of all the work that is performed by the firm, so that as the manager you can come in and look at all of the different tasks that are scheduled for the day or into the future or yesterday, whatever time period you want, and it's that bird's eye view. So you can manage the firm's expectations and the client's expectations realistically. You can see what work is in progress right now, what your staff are working on. You can see what's been deferred. Do you need to step in and help? Is the staff stuck on something? Did a staff call in sick today? Who's available to perform the work? Can we take on any new clients? Do we need to hire? Do all these questions sound familiar? We all ask ourselves these questions. It's hard to know. So you want some kind of system that'll help you sort of aggregate all of that information so that you can see that. And Aero definitely does help you measure the workload that's associated with a client or a fixed fee engagement. And that really helps reduce the instances or likelihood of scope creep. And it helps you allocate the firm's resources, which I'm mainly talking about your staff, your very precious resource, ahead of time. And you can see how much work is assigned to staff and manage their time, whether you're paying hourly or billing hourly or not, time is still a factor if you're trying to schedule work to be performed in a timely manner. And you can measure that labor resource as they're performing the work, and you can see how long. I'll show you a screenshot next where you can see what the staff see when they're working on it. Let's go to that. But you can imagine this will help you manage your labor resource against the fixed fee revenue that's coming in. So here's a screenshot of what your staff see as they're performing work. In this screenshot, they're doing payroll using Intuit Online Payroll, and you can see there's a checklist. There are some little links off to the right there that are resources and links that are taking them either to the procedure manual to read more about this step, or to the online banking for the client to perform the work, or what have you. You can see along the bottom, I think, if you can see that. Can you see my mouse here? If you click on any of these tabs open up. The vault will have all the passwords for the client, that sort of thing. Lots of resources here. But notice this little green timer here. When your staff person clicks from their list to start doing this work, they come into this screen and the timer starts automatically. So it's tracking their time, which is a factor for you as the firm trying to schedule these services for your clients, and especially when you're talking about juggling multiple services for multiple clients. Okay, and I have one more screen here. So at the beginning, I was talking about defining the services you offer, and particularly documenting the procedures and creating step-by-step checklists. Setting up these processes for an accounting firm can be difficult and very time-consuming, but it is the job of the firm. If you want to have a business that offers these services, then you have to define them. I mean, or you're just going to go rogue, kind of chaotic. But anyway, I want to acknowledge that it is very time-consuming. And over the years, we've had many firms ask us for help with this process. So we recently launched Aero Library. Here's a screenshot here. Aero Library is available for Aero users, and I just wanted to point it out to you today because it does help relieve that process of documenting all of your procedures. The Aero Library templates are step-by-step instructions for how to perform, remember those step-by-step checklists I was talking about? For how to perform common tasks in some of today's most popular apps, and such as paying bills in Bill.com. Anyway, you can look through these and see which ones are available in the library. Aero Library procedures are also available, and those are the fully documented with screenshots instructions on how to perform so many of these common tasks that we are all using, and we all together cannot perform all the accounting services needed around the country for everyone. So we work together here, and a lot of us are using the same popular cloud-based apps, and so you'll find that we're now offering the full documentation and step-by-step checklists on how to use some of these in the standard sense. Of course, we all have clients with unique needs, and you may need to, and you can. If you can see the screen here, I'll point out, you can pull in one of these templates and perform it as is, or you can clone it, which means it'll copy it into your Aero account, and then you can add whatever special things you need to do for your client. But this really helps you kickstart your accounting workflow, and these are kept maintained. And it helps you really tap into a resource of community knowledge and capitalize on all of it. So Aero Library, I think, makes it easier to set up a new engagement or to embrace apps that you're unfamiliar with and provide new cloud accounting services. So just to reiterate, the Aero Library templates, which are the checklists, and procedures are pre-built for you to get you going quickly. They're maintained, so you don't have to keep them updated. Bill.com just rolled out an update this month. They're now doing location tracking with QBO and I can't remember the other thing they're doing. And so those templates have been updated now. So they do not replace, though, they don't replace your own firm's checklists and procedures. So you can have both. And yes, you can still absolutely create firm-specific templates and procedures. Okay, how are we on time? Have I gone way over? I want to thank you all for joining us today. I think Max and I are going to do a little Q&A. I love this screenshot here. To build a firm of the future, I'll just summarize my little rant today. Define your core services and then create standards for how you're going to deliver them, and then systemize the delivery using some type of workflow management tool like Aero. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Laura. And we do have lots of good questions popping up. And I'm just gonna, I guess we'll just page through them and you and Max can take them away. I think there's been a couple of questions. We'll start off with the ones that, so there's been a couple of questions about integrating Aero and Practice Ignition because it's obviously a very good partnership. Do you guys want to talk about that a little bit?
I think it's a fantastic idea. When the two apps met, they thought it was a great idea also, I'll just say. So yeah, we'd love to hear feedback on whether other people do. I mean, put your votes in. If that's something we should look at, then we want to hear. Anybody want to use that?
Yeah,
I'm getting some capital letters on yeses. So I think that there's some steps along the way. And speaking of polls, you reminded me, thank you, Laura. I'm going to launch a little poll as well, asking if anybody would be interested in a demo. So if you want to just fill that out, that would be great. We're getting a lot of people who want to see that integration. Max, do you want to talk about it a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's like Laura said when we spoke earlier in the year, it seemed like a great fit. Also, having talked to Laura, there's very busy development schedules on both sides, but it's something we're definitely going to be taking a look at getting off the ground probably sometime next year.
Yes. And actually, I think an interim step we've talked about, maybe we can do some integration with what exists in the library and what exists in Practice Ignition as well.
Yes, there are a couple things you can do with naming conventions between the two products that make it a little easier to use them together. So for those of you that are users of Aero and users of PI, this will be pretty familiar. But just getting a naming convention where your service items in Practice Ignition and the arrows that correspond to the work have the same name, so that when you get the notification in Practice Ignition of a particular proposal being accepted, you can then immediately process that work into Aero with the goal of moving that integration to the point where that would happen automatically for you.
Yeah, we do love to automate things.
Okay, so there was a general question if we're going to share these slides from the two different presentations. And yes, we will post those with the recording. And everybody who registered for the webinar will have access to that. Let's see. There was a question about pricing. Do you guys both want to go over the two different pricing for Practice Ignition and Aero?
Yeah, I can. Let's see if you can see my screen. Give me 1 second. Where? Oops. Okay, can you see that? I'll just show everyone where to find ours. So we have a pricing page here. Aero's pricing is based on the size of the firm, and by size I mean a group user count. So we're not billing per user per month. You're either a one-person solopreneur or you've got 2 to 5 staff, or you're a large firm. You'll see 2 prices listed for each of these firm sizes, and that represents whether or not you are subscribed to the Aero library with all of those procedures and checklists pre-built for you.
As far as the Practice Ignition pricing goes, it starts at $60 a month for the product, and then payment pricing depends on whether or not you're processing ACH or credit cards, but it's $1 for ACH and 2.9% for credit cards. Then it kind of scales up from there depending on the number of relationships we're managing for you in terms of the subscription. Thanks, Laura.
Did I get the right page? Yes.
You did get the right page. Thank you. So yeah, most firms will start on that $59 a month, which gets you up to 100 active clients, so 100 deals won basically that are ongoing. And then, Laura, if you scroll down just a little bit, you've got the payments pricing, which you don't have to use in the system, but if you do, is it just on a transactional basis?
Right, but this is so cool because if you sign, so we're talking about you're there, you're giving the explanation of your services, and then you score this client, they say yes to you, and they click to accept it and sign from their mobile phone device. And then if you're going to do fixed fee recurring payment, they can put in their banking info, and you guys can process payment all through your one system, right?
Exactly.
So that's what you mean by the payments fees.
Yeah. So one-step checkout for your clients, almost like buying something on Amazon. They can get the services they need and pay you right away. So you can again confirm kind of what we touched on in the webinar, that they are a client who's able to pay you and who is committed to working with your firm.
Yep, I love this.
Were there any other questions, Sarah?
There's quite a few questions about what Aero integrates with, and currently Aero integrates directly with QuickBooks Online, and it also has a Gmail integration. We do have plans, of course, what we just mentioned, to integrate with Practice Ignition, but we don't integrate with Xero right now. So let's see. There was a question, it's an interesting question, that somebody who is kind of new to both Aero and Practice Ignition as to why it would be beneficial for Aero and Practice Ignition to integrate. Do you want to talk about that?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, that's totally fine. You can take it if you want, Laura.
I was just going to say, so as Max was saying, they say yes to you in that appointment. They click to accept. They put in their banking info. They are now paying you. So they are a client, and they're a good client, right, Max?
Exactly.
And so now, how cool if you could press a button and Aero would set up all of the services that they just agreed to pay you for, so that you just have to assign them to staff and set the schedule, right? So it's not that it's that much more difficult, but it would be a little more manual. Right now, you would have to go into Aero and go, okay, the client just said that they want us to perform these services. They're paying me for them, and now I have to come into Aero and I have to, take each one. I got to find the AP. We're doing AP. I got to find the inter bills and the pay bills. I'm going to assign that to the client and which staff I want to do it. So it would just be a little more in automation.
Exactly.
Oh, I had one question, Laura. Do you want to take a second? There's a question. What is the difference between the premium content and the basic content in the library?
So the library is an integral part of Aero, and it's available. Let me go back to Aero's pricing page. So let's say you're a small firm, and you subscribe to Aero, and you have the starting rate $79 a month. You get Aero Library and all of its basic content. And there are some great, very common reconciling in QuickBooks Online sorts of checklists available there. And those may be perfectly sufficient for what you're doing at your firm. And then there are some premium content, both documented procedures and checklist templates for, say, using Expensify to process your clients' company credit cards for all of the clients' cardholders. That's premium content. So you can look through any of this on our website. If you come to features and go to the Aero library, you can review all of this, and if it has a diamond on it, that means it's premium content, and see the difference between the two.
Okay. Brendan, I don't know if you see any other questions that need to be answered, but I think that we have answered most of them.
Yeah, I can't see any either.
Okay. Well, then I think that we can thank everyone so much for attending today, and thank you, Laura and Max, for your presentations. They were very enjoyable. And we have our poll, and we will be sending out an email with access to the recording and the slides.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for attending, everyone. Thanks for having us.